welcome to the show. I keep starting before the intro, but welcome to the show this week. Thank you for joining me. If this is your first time watching the show, welcome to Young Women Speak Out, which is a 6-week program being broadcasted by the Sylvia Global Media Network to elevate the voices of young activists from around the world. So far, we've had some really cool adventures. We've spoken to LGBT activists from Nigeria. We've talked about young women's leadership in Kenya and feminism and fashion in Ghana. So some very exciting stuff. This week, we are switching gears a little bit and moving to the Caribbean, which I'm really excited about. And I will be speaking to a really, really amazing young woman from Grenada. Believe me, you're in for a treat. As always, before we get started, just a couple of things to say. The show is being streamed live on the Sylvia Global website, which is sylviaglobal.com. If you'd like to catch any of the shows that you might have missed, you can look them up on the Sylvia Global YouTube channel. They're all listed there. We've got all 3 shows there. And as always, folks, please stay engaged throughout the show. I'm happy for you all to tweet questions to me, send me messages on Facebook, or email. I'm always looking out for feedback and comments about the show, but also for questions from my guests, so please feel free to do that. And so this week, we have a really, really incredible person. I'm really honored to introduce to everyone Malaika Brooks-Smith-Lowe, who is an activist from the beautiful Spice Isle of Grenada. Malaika is the co-founder of the Groundation Grenada Action Collective, and she says her approach to social change includes yoga instruction at the Spice Harmony Yoga Studio, which she runs with her family. And also really amazing stuff. She has an agricultural development and education project called the Grenada Goat Dairy Project, which I'm really excited to learn more about and to talk about. If you want to engage with Malaika throughout the show or afterwards, you can find her on Twitter, Malaika BSL, so that's MALAIKA BSL on Twitter. As always, you can find me on Twitter, SheRoxLox, SHEROXLOX. So, before we get started, I'd just like Malaika to introduce herself. Even though I have, you could just tell our viewers a little bit about who you are and what you're doing.
Well, hi. It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I mean, right now I'm kind of battling it out with a little bit of sniffles, so that's like the first apology. But yeah, it's amazing. All the things that you said, to me, somehow yoga, agricultural development, and art really come together in my mind. So I tend to have a lot of things going on, but also trying to find ways to strike a balance and facilitate other people kind of rising up and being active as well. Yeah.
Awesome. So one of the things that I read from your intro, and I know from knowing you, is that you describe yourself as an artist and activist. Mm-hmm. What does that mean to you, and what does that mean for the kind of work that you create?
Well, I guess when I really started to explore art as a mode for me to articulate myself, and primarily I use photography and film. Mm-hmm. When I first started exploring that in college, it was happening hand in hand with an exploration in anthropology. I was really interested in visual anthropology, so the study of visual cultures, so looking at everything from, how museums function in society, to how advertising functions, to the way that art engages with social issues. So I was really an anthropology major initially who took a lot of art history and a lot of art. And then at some point I was awarded a Mellon Mays undergraduate research fellowship, which is to support underrepresented people in professorial positions. So that's like the kind of goal of that fellowship. And basically my advisor at the time, as I was studying the politics of representation, so questions like, who has the power to represent someone, where do you, how do you have access to representing yourself, and for us in the Caribbean, we know certainly, especially in the smaller islands, most of our media comes from abroad, which is all well and good to get lots of input, but it's hard because we don't have a local voice to, you know, kind of be in the mix as well. So for me, studying about those questions of visual politics led me, and my advisor kind of suggested, you know, why not have your responses be in the same language of what you're studying? So because I was doing a lot of art anyway that tended to be conceptual, tended to ask questions, tended to get people kind of, you know, thinking a little bit, I guess, the suggestion was, well, you know, this visual can be the way that you communicate. So writing is crucial, but what happens when I'm responding to something visually with something visual with something visual?
Right.
So for me, the art aspect becomes a mode of representing ideas and questions. So activism kind of gets, art kind of channels that and allows for a way of being creative about how we think about the issues that we're dealing with.
So kind of just taking from that, one of the things that I'm interested in is knowing about some of the work that you have produced. You mentioned that, you know, you engage with film and you also engage with photography. Tell me a little bit about some of the things that you've been doing.
Yeah, well, let's see. In terms of video work, a few years ago, you know, sometimes you really see, like, you see a flyer and it has a deadline and you're like, ooh, I want to do that, and like a lot of times you don't do it.
Yeah.
So I was I was in at University of the West Indies in Trinidad, where I was working. I've been kind of working on my master's in cultural studies through them, and I was there for a few semesters for coursework, and I saw this flyer that was for agriculture and science film competition, and I was like, that's awesome and sick. So I decided to, yeah, and I was like, ooh, okay, you know, and also the prizes are a good incentive, you know, for us, like artists, activists, students, whoever. You're always looking to try to be sustainable as well, and the prizes were quite significant, and it's often, we don't often get compensated for our work. So I ended up applying, ended up making a film with the other co-founder of Groundation, Richie Maitland, and we created this piece called Food for Thought, which was this stop motion animation about one particular model that we think would be useful in the Caribbean. Actually, you have utilized this in Jamaica, the CSA, Community Supported Agriculture. I know you've gotten like boxes of fresh fruits and vegetables from a farm in Jamaica, and so this whole animation was about that concept and showing people what would it look like to cut out the middleman and connect directly with your farmers and basically have a share in a farm so that you get the fresh food when it's available. So that was, I think, what that video piece, randomly enough, is what kind of propelled me into more video in the Caribbean, because I moved back from the States in 2010, and then that video, all of that manifested over, like, I think 2011 we won 3rd place, and then, you know, they flew me to Barbados for the Caribbean Tales Film Festival, and I got involved with that and did a 48-hour film challenge there with 2 amazing young men from Jamaica who own this production called Blip Production, and it was amazing. It was amazing to be thrown in that kind of creative environment, and we made an amazing film in 48 hours from start to finish. I mean, it was 9 minutes, but it was like, you know, that's epic for people who do video, you know, that's epic. So, and then in terms of my photography work, well, you know, and the more conceptual work, I think a lot of times I'm really interested, I guess the yoga comes into play, like questions of the mind and like how we are so connected all the time. Like right now I have like 20 browsers open with 20 tabs each. No, that's overwhelming. That's an exaggeration. It's like 5 browsers. 5 browsers with like 10 tabs each. But the point is we're just stretched so thin.
I know, yeah.
I mean, I can connect with all these people that weren't possible. You know, my parents had to write letters and I can write emails. But the point is I still, like, our mind is just constantly busy. And what does it mean to be able to have the ability to say, I want to just not think right now. I would like to experience. And for most of us, it's very difficult to say, okay, I'm not going to think, I'm going to experience, and also to recognize that we are not our thoughts. And that is a really freeing concept as well, because if we were our thoughts, then we wouldn't know that we were thinking, you know. So there is a witness, you know, we are witnessing the movements of our mind, and oftentimes we're kind of caught up by it versus being in control, you know. So we've all been in those places where something has happened in our life and we just, our mind is just like, but this and this and this, you know. And so even in my work, I guess, thinking about how do we shift that paradigm, and how do we deal with that too, you know? So not only just change it, but recognize it, cope, and because I guess it tends to be a lot of external influence that has us going, you know, like expectations of others, societal norms, all this stuff, like we're constantly in negotiation with. And so I had the pleasure of doing an artist residency in Barbados.
Yes, tell me about that. I was going to ask about that with Milk.
Yeah.
Tell me.
Oh, it was my first artist residency. It was at Fresh Milk, which is a contemporary art platform that is, I mean, amazing. This is just a space where Annalie Davis and her team there are just doing what they can on like as zero budget, right? Like, because we're all just trying, you know, there's not really funding for the arts, even though a lot of our governments like to talk about that. The money tends to not go where it's really needed and it's being used, but she is doing amazing things in her space, and it was so wonderful. So an artist residency is basically when a space, you know, a gallery, a museum or something, invites you as an artist to come for whatever amount of time and create work, but also do outreach in the community. And, you know, funny, in Grenada, when I told a few people about it, they're like, so, like, does the work belong to you? Which is a question I had never thought about, but quite a few people were like, oh, so what, is it their stuff now? And it's actually all yours, but, you know, what it does is it helps them to activate their space and to bring inspiration to their community. So it was wonderful. I made a video installation piece that dealt with these issues of like the mind and just kind of constant thinking called
So is the piece available now, or are you still working on it?
Well, it's not available because I'm submitting it to a few film festivals.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so like the Trinidad and Tobago Film Festival and Caribbean Tales and a few other like new media. I'm kind of have my eye on a few new media festivals globally, but so
you can
it's
also
not
check out
available
the
yet.
Caribbean Film Corner, which happens in London in September. They would love something like that, so definitely connect with the Caribbean Film Corner, and I'd be happy to make that connection after. But I'm also, you know, just really interested with this idea of Groundation Grenada as well, because you said it was something that you founded when you came back from university. You went to UE. Tell me a little bit more about Groundation, what you do, who your other co-founder is, and, you know, why it's important.
Well, so when I did my undergrad at Smith College in Massachusetts, which actually my 5-year reunion is starting tomorrow, so that's why I'm up here in the States at the moment. But when I moved home in 2010, it was actually the summer before I moved home that Richie and I came up with the concept. You know, we both really have like been connected so deeply partially because of our passion for social justice. And so that summer of 2009 is where the seedling started and the concept came up, and the blog started then too. And it took, you know, sometimes it takes things being really thought out first before you launch them, and other times it means like you have part of the concept and you let it grow organically. And Groundation started, you know, and then we had the blog. It wasn't very active. Every now and again we post. And then in the past year or so, it's just taken off, you know, partially because, you know, with working on my thesis, I also like to try to find other things to do. So the blog has really taken off, and what it is, like, you know, the web presence is really useful because it acts as a magnet for the types of folks that we need to help us kind of have the capacity to do other things. So the blog has allowed us to connect locally in the diaspora, and just internationally with people who are interested in being actively engaged, but in a creative way as well, you know.
So what are some of the topics that you guys write about on the blog, or some of the issues that come up?
So we deal with a lot of women's issues of gender. Actually, I don't even want to call them women's issues. I'm like adamant now around recognizing that a lot of what we call women's issues, if they're anybody's issues, they're men's issues, but also that they're everybody's issues, right? We are all connected. There's no like woman or man living on an island alone with only women or men. Maybe that's happening, but the point is that, you know, so we deal with a lot of issues around like creating a voice for folks who are creative writers too, but also thinking about being critical of politics, like how do you create a space for young people in particular to engage with political questions, you know. So one of our most popular post was an article written by these two Grenadians they're both living in different parts of Europe at the moment. And they're these two amazing young women, and they wrote this article around questioning and just raising questions around the recent purchase of a hotel in Grenada by Sandals, which is like a multinational, very wealthy institution, really. And they had incredible tax breaks. I mean, like years and years and like decades now. They were awarded decades of tax exemptions, etc. And so these women were raising questions, you know. And the thing is, it's not to say that this is good or this is bad per se, but the point is the way that the government treated that deal, they didn't speak to the community, you know. So we're kind of asking for more dialogue overall. So dealing with issues also of access to like well-rounded education, just access overall, but also like how do you incubate action of other people. So we don't have to do all the initiatives, but we can support other things happening. So we act as an amplifier too.
Well, that's really interesting, because one of the questions I had, you know, I'm a big fan of the blog. I check it out regularly. But one of the questions that I have for you is just kind of, and also I'm sure some of the viewers have, is, you know, what is a sense of collective action? How do we, you know, given the fact that there are lots of things that are happening across the region, across the Caribbean, you know, people that are trying to engage with these issues both in their own islands, but also, you know, across the region, how do we amplify collective action? What does that mean?
Well, I think one of the foundational things is, and you know, this word, community is like one of those words now, like in my mind, like diversity, that just like could be so watered down. But building maybe family. But the point is, none of this stuff is sustainable, none of any kind of action whatsoever, unless we trust each other, you know? So one of our main actions recently is, a lot of it is around wellness and connecting in that way. So we do these maroon retreats. And we have one coming up at the beginning of June. And what it is like, it's just a space to have affordable access to, fairly affordable, right? It's hard because we also want all the massage therapists that we work with and, you know, the spaces, etc., to be able to be sustainable too. But the point is, it's like trying to create a positive environment for people to get to know each other. So the last Maroon Retreat was so amazing because there was such a mixture of people there from Grenada. So it wasn't that it was necessarily like tourists coming in at all. What it was a broad cross-section of people, from young activists to, you know, small business owners to, you know, people, one couple who's there for the medical school, to this woman, this American woman whose like daughter married a Grenadian, so she comes down to visit her and, you know, the family, and these kind of sectors of our society that don't necessarily get thought about because there's a lot of focus on tourism. So bringing people, I think collective action, the foundation of that is really mutual respect and
community.
Yeah, compassion, like, you know, because people, you need people to be invested. If we don't know each other, you know, how are we going to care about like keeping our commitments and that kind of thing? So we really are thinking about building the base in that way, bringing people together in small ways to say, okay, like we care, you know, and we want to know, and we want to be able to, as a group, you know that we are growing together, you know, so not just pushing towards, like, so, you know, with these kind of initiatives, you're trying to get things passed or you're trying to, you know, build awareness around something, but are we also nurturing ourselves and making sure that we are creating a healthy environment to work in all together, you know? So I think that's like a foundational part of it for us at this moment.
I mean, I think that's really, really a good way to think about collective action, is also thinking about how we build community and how we nurture ourselves. And it makes me think of actually how we met, which was at a young feminist grounding called the Catch a Fire Grounding in Barbados last year, bringing together a group of young feminists from around the region. So one of the things that I wanted to kind of, you know, just put out there and talk to you a little bit more about is the Catch a Fire Collective. You know, what has it meant to be part of a regional collective of young feminists organizing and trying to kind of engage in collective action around, you know, putting our issues on the table, supporting each other's initiatives? What has it meant to be part of something like that?
Well, it's amazing. I mean, it's difficult because, again, like, everybody is so overloaded and you get like a million emails a day from like different things all the time. And so it can be hard, I think, sometimes to get people to be active. But what I like about Catch a Fire is, like, whenever an initiative comes up, there's a few people who end up being the point people and they push it through, which feels really, really good. And I think that even small things, like, for instance, the photo pool that we put on Flickr for 1 Billion Rising, where we showed what was happening regionally just by saying, hey, anything happening in the region, put a picture here. And that led to some article that was writing about 1 Billion Rising across the region used photos from there. So it's just like sometimes it's the smallest things. Like, you know, I think we have a long way to go, and I know that for some people it feels like the fire has fizzled. Realistically, you know, it was so intense being together for those few days and feeling like, yes, we can do this. And then, like, going back to your space where it feels like there's less of that energy around you and less of the support can be frustrating. But there's something about knowing that these women exist and being able to connect with you guys that makes things so much more sweet, you know, and possible.
Well, actually, right now I'm just going to share, for anyone that's watching or listening and is interested in, you know, becoming a part of the Catch a Fire network, we do share links with each other on Twitter. We use the hashtag Catch a Fire, which is FYAH for fire, or you can find out a little bit more about us. There is a website that you can visit, about.me/catchafire, and sign up to our listserv there. There's also work that happens through Code Red for Gender Justice, which is based in Barbados, that supports the Catch a Fire initiative. But, you know, one of the things that, one of the questions that actually came through on Twitter was asking, you know, what are some of the issues that young feminists or young women are organizing around in the Caribbean? You know, whether in Grenada or more broadly that you've seen happening across the region, what's going on? Because there is this sense, you know, is Caribbean feminism dead? You know, what's happening? What are young women doing? So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's refreshing to recognize that there are young folks who really are ready to be engaged, and sometimes I think that the support systems aren't there for that to happen. So, for instance, thinking about, like, I don't know, a couple different things come to mind because I know, I think that a major issue right now in Grenada, for instance, like, some of the things that we're dealing with are around, like, LGBT rights, but also around domestic violence. I think as the economic situation gets harder in Grenada, there's more domestic violence that's maybe happening. I don't know if there's statistical evidence of that at the moment, but I know that that is a reality, right? When people feel like they don't have power economically, etc., then they're going to try to put other people down and like take out their frustration. So we have a lot of scary things going on in terms of domestic violence, in terms of rape. I think that also just being able, but at the same time in the Caribbean, and apparently not just in the Caribbean, young men are really kind of failing in the traditional school system, right? So it feels a bit complicated to want to focus in on women's issues without also talking about what are some of the issues specifically affecting men, and what does that mean? Obviously, you know, to be frustrated in the school system leads to other frustration as well. So wondering about those questions. I think people are also really trying to organize around access to like economic growth and like opportunities for self-empowerment as well, and also around like sexual reproductive rights, even though that language isn't used per se. But, you know, and it's a debate in the region around questions of abortion, etc. You know, we don't have access to safe abortions, legal abortions in Grenada. I think maybe some of the other islands, Barbados maybe has, I'm not sure. But I know in Grenada for sure, Planned Parenthood certainly is not talking about that. You know, there's no discussion around that. And so what does that mean? I mean, people are having this procedure done in Grenada or leaving if they have access to that. And how can we talk about this issue in a more open way? You know, I think it can be difficult within the religious context as well, you know, to have some of these harder discussions, like for instance, around sexual education in school. I mean, kids are having sex. That's like the news bulletin of the day. They are, you know, so how do we help to make the decisions more healthy? And it is my sense that by having real discussions about sex, you minimize the amount of kind of less healthy, less kind of enriching experiences that young people have. You know, if it's less taboo, then you're making an opportunity for people to say, you know what, this is not something that I have to do to like gain some social status because it's taboo. We've had conversations around this. I don't feel ready for this, or I do feel ready for this. I don't see why that's such a scary thing for our society to grapple with, but it is.
Right.
You know?
You know, one of the things that I would say is that I actually think that a lot of conversation and discussion, particularly among young people, is happening online. So people using social media, particularly in very small communities. I know that that happens a lot in Antigua, lots of debates and discussions happening about these issues online because it feels kind of a little bit safer than it would to have them more openly, more broadly. You can also hide behind social media, which, you know, take what you will, can be a good or a bad thing. But I think that actually a lot of young people are using those platforms and are kind of creating their own media to be able to have these conversations and to be able to push issues forward. Also, there are lots of emerging platforms that are coming out of the woodwork. I know that in Trinidad there's a sexuality studies course program that's happening this summer. Also in Barbados there's the Gender Institute that happens every summer. So there's, I think, different spaces in which we're trying to push and have these conversations, debates. Of course, you can say, you know, who can access those spaces, but I think it's important that we make it more inclusive and more open so that, you know, these issues and these conversations are coming from young people.
Right, and then how do we move the discussion off the internet too? Like, how do we take it into action? So like, for instance, on June 6th, we are partnering with, and this is like my first time officially announcing it, we haven't put out the stuff yet, but we're partnering with ARC magazine, which is like this ultimate amazing, and I can't even call it just a publication, but ARC is basically a contemporary arts magazine out of St. Vincent that is stunning. It's like the production value is amazing. It's a nonprofit, and they just really focus on positioning art and artists within a social context and within a critical social context. But beyond that, they also are activators of space. So they're not just saying this is what's happening, this is what artists are doing. They are facilitating artists in this really powerful way. So Groundation is partnering with ARC to launch their 7th issue in Grenada.
Wow.
Yeah, and because that same week, like, so also our retreat for Groundation is capitalizing on that same week, which is the Caribbean Studies Association conference is happening in Grenada that week. So the launch is going to be happening one of the nights. The day before is going to be the retreat. We're really finding ways of getting people out of the kind of like panel, sitting in a room, which is awesome. I'm very excited that these things are going to be happening in Grenada. But also, like, how do you connect people in a less formal setting? So it's going to be great. We're going to have a conversation with Unia Kempadu, who's a Guyanese author who lives in Grenada and is a dear friend of mine. She's going to do a reading from her new book, and we're going to have a dialogue. And then also we're going to be screening a lot of great films, including the Grenadian premiere of Ring the Alarm, which is this Caribbean film collective piece that came out last year. So it's a lot of good things, but it's like moving some of that off the internet.
Yeah.
You know, and into space. And what does that mean to let the dialogues move also into space and then become action? And then also to go back to some of the issues within the Grenadian context in particular, I really just want to raise this, which is that, so for a young woman in secondary school, in high school, if she gets pregnant, she cannot continue her education in the school. She can still take the CXE examinations, which is like the end of high school, you know, qualifications or whatever, but she can't complete school. She gets kicked out. The boy, the father, the potential father, I guess the idea is like, well, you don't know who the dad is, so he can't get kicked out.
Yeah, I know it's the same situation in Antigua as well.
Yeah, and I'm not vying for anybody, in fact, getting kicked out of school, because if anybody needs an education, it's going to be a young mother or a young father, you know, and it's something that people kind of talk about a little bit, and I was shocked. I was with a group of young lawyers, and most lawyers in Grenada are women. All the judges basically are women. I was shocked that these young, educated women, and not to say that you can't have this view that the women should be kicked out, but unanimously they were all like, well, no, she shouldn't be able to continue school because she's going to be a bad influence on the others. And I'm like, okay, like, pregnancy can be awesome, but as far as I understand, there's a lot of challenges, and there might be something really insightful about, instead of tucking away this pregnant young person, having her there, like, you know, not to say that all it is going to be her like complaining about swollen feet and how horrible this experience is. It might be amazing for her too, but the point is, you know, we need to talk about that. One issue that they brought up was that, oh, in one school they tried to let the girl continue, but she was teased and stuff, and I'm like, so because she's teased, you're going to push her to the side? Why don't you deal with the issue in the school? So that's something that I think that we're going to be possibly taking on soon, finding a way to like build some capacity around that issue. Because to me,
and I know that there are different groups around the region that, you know, have been addressing this issue. Women of Antigua as one group, tackling the Ministry of Education, taking that on as well. So I feel like, you know, the more when we talk about collective action, building community, sharing strategies and ideas for dealing with issues like this, I feel like the more we talk to each other, the more, you know, we figure out what works and how to kind of take these conversations forward and make it actually a Caribbean conversation, as well as, you know, what's happening in particular countries. Now,
that gives it more weight. It gives it more weight.
Exactly. Now, I know that we have very limited time left, but there are two things that I wanted to talk to you a little bit about before we end the show today. The first is, because I cannot not ask this, but how did you get into, you know, the Goat Dairy Project? Tell me because, you know, as Malaika's doing many, you know, 1,000,001 things, you know, so appears the Goat Dairy Project. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, so the Goat Dairy is a project that was co-founded by Christine Curry a few years ago, and, you know, the initial vision was that this was something that would help with the recovery after Hurricane Ivan and provide like productive pathways for folks and like provide resources around, dairy production, because see, goats have a long history in Grenada. People would have a little goat, their mom would make butter, like, you know, it's actually amazing. It's not even just in Grenada. Like, I think that goats as a little domestic animal connect with a lot of people in a generation that has kind of passed, or not passed, but they're, you know, an older generation that exists still. There's a kind of nostalgia that I don't even know how that exists, but it's there. And the point is, like, the goat dairy is really, the initial vision was to like hand it over to farmers and let them run it on their own. But realistically, these rural folks that we work with do not historically have not been given the tools to manage this kind of a project. And so our idea is, like, how do we help to create, facilitate growth in that way so that people can be independent agents. And so now most of us on the board, all of us except for one, are members of the local community. Two of the people on the board are young members of the staff at the goat dairy. So out of 5 of us, 3 of us are in our 20s. And it's really both a education and demonstration facility that we have, that we provide education for goat farmers, but also people who might be interested in that. But we also provide a guaranteed market. So if people, we're trying to support people getting up to standard, getting the water access they need, the electricity, etc. But we will buy back their milk. Because we produce a product. So the idea is to really be self-sustainable. So we did a lot of funding. We had a huge Kickstarter campaign that was immensely successful. But, excuse me, we also need to be sustainable in a way that we don't have to keep going through the funding process, you know? So we produce a product, this delicious Chev cheese and this chocolate delight. We want to start doing other things too. We have more, like, we have a huge demand for our product as well. The concept, I think people are really into. And then it's also a breeding program where we manage genetics of really high milking goats. And what it has done is provide a platform to talk about eating local, to provide a platform for thinking about where our food comes from. So it's not just about the goats, it's also this larger thing. And then we are about to open officially, the construction's almost done, at this primary school project, where we opened a second facility next to the 4-H garden at the St. Patrick Anglican School, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful outdoor classroom space, but also will house, I think, about 16 goats, and that compost will get used for their garden. They'll learn about milking. They have like a poultry unit. Yeah.
So if folks are interested in learning more about the Grenada Goat Dairy Project, where do they go? How do they find it?
Right. So for me, like, my main thing is social media. So I'm not really in there with the goats all the time. I like to say, you know, I'm a budding organic farmer. So it's really social media everywhere. The Goat Dairy. It's such a generic name that we got it for everything. So twitter.com/thegoatdairy, facebook.com/thegoatdairy, Instagram.
Wow.
Goat Dairy. Lots of awesome pictures. Yeah. Oh, we are on Instagram. So yeah, that's all that for the Goat Dairy. Definitely look into the project, explore, see what we're up to. It's a great initiative. And I think that it's a unique model, because people are thinking, how can you be a nonprofit and you sell a product? Well, we sell a product precisely because we need to not be caught up in the funding model, you know? Yeah.
So I'm gonna read a quote that means a lot to me. I'm gonna share it with you, and then ask you to just share your thoughts, your experiences, your feelings about this quote, and we'll kind of take it from there. So it's a quote from Caribbean feminist writer and activist Audre Lorde, who says, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgent, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare." Now, I know you, when I think of you, I think, you know, self-care, I think about looking after myself, I think about, you know, eating well and exercising. Tell me a little bit about, you know, your work around self-care, particularly in activist communities.
I love me some Audre Lorde. Also because her mom is from Carriacou, which is part of Grenada. And yeah, she That quote is so amazing. I actually recently got a tattoo of one of her quotes on my arm, which is "Revolution is not a one-time event," which reminds me also of the quote that you read, because it's about how on a daily basis, how do we kind of enact what it is that we want, even on an individual level. And for me, yoga has been a revolutionary tool. I mean, I feel, even on the days when I feel the most horrible about life, if I go in and teach a class, I get so much energy from people, and vice versa. It's a beautiful experience to be able to create a positive environment. And for me, there's also power in saying I can heal myself, and I can heal myself emotionally and physically with tools and with help, of course, if as much as those are available. But the point is that we are fine as we are. We are amazing beings, and we're constantly bombarded with images telling us that we're not okay. I mean, all you need to do, I'm here in New York, is walk around and there's advertisements everywhere. Yeah, they're telling you what products are available, but they're also telling you that
you are not
this and this and this and this to be happy. That you're not happy with your wrinkles, you're not happy with your car, you're not happy with this. And so for me, it's been important, again, around this issue of how do you set a foundation. So we can have all these movements, but we need a base, you know? So self-care is critical, and especially in our communities where we're constantly told it's a luxury, right? You know, it's a luxury to do yoga. It's a luxury to get a massage. It's a luxury that you should not be doing because you have kids, you don't have money. It's not a luxury. It's also what you need to just heal and to enjoy life, you know? So it's really around that.
One of the things that I value a whole lot is this idea of balance. And I think that balancing, looking after yourself with, you know, the things that you have to do every day is crucial, is very key. So we've run out of time, unfortunately, this week, but I'm going to kind of give you a little second or two just to kind of wrap things up. If there's something that you want people to remember or take away, you know, please do share it now, and then we'll wrap up the show.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm just very honored to be here. It's really incredible. You know, check out Groundation. We're doing amazing things. We're trying to agitate for a library, which Grenada doesn't have. That's a huge thing, too, that we're working on right now, building a library ourselves, even. So just really staying connected also to what's happening in the region, you know, because there's a lot of movement coming out of the region, and I think a lot of folks in the diaspora in particular have no idea that we're so active across the region. So, but thank you so much for having me. I'm honored.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me today, Malaika. Actually, this week we're going to end off with a video from one of my favorite music artists. Her name is Sara Tavares from Cape Verde, and the song is actually called Balance. So ending on this idea of self-care and balance, we'll be playing that for you in a moment. And next week, I will be joined by Zena Edwards, poet, activist extraordinaire out of the UK. I'm really looking forward to talking to Zena. Hopefully, we can convince her to perform one of her poems on the show. So, you know, activate for that. And see everyone next week. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you enjoy the video. Take care.
Como vi dançar no Zimbábue, quero também contigo xingar. Uma dança nova, mistura de samba com samba, de mambo com rumba, tua mão na minha e a minha na tua. Balanceie, balançaia, swinga para lá, swinga para cá, yeah. Balanceie, balançaia, Maria. Maria José, swing no pé, se não chega pra lá. Somos livres para celebrar, livres para nos libertar. Oi, oi. Como crianças brincando, crianças subindo, crianças sendo crianças. Como crianças brincando, crianças subindo, crianças. Balanceia, balançaia, swinga para cair. Balanceia, balançaia. Maria José, swing no pé, se não chega pra lá. Adoro quando tu deixas levar assim. Fechas os olhos e danças só para mim. Sabe, uma dança tua, mistura de não vem que não vem com um sorriso. Porém que me diz que o teu destino é só a manhã de alguém que diz que vai, mas que vem. Me engana que eu gosto. Fala swinga para lá, swinga para cá, balanceia.